Soldi.
And we are here today to talk about one of Rafael's works that will be featured in the upcoming exhibition, Gossip Between Us.
I was born and raised in Peru, so my relationship to my identity as a Peruvian person, also as a queer person, has played a big role in the work I've come to make over the last 20 years. And I work primarily with photography, with video, text, sculpture, performance, really a wide range of mediums, even though photography has been my primary medium for a long time. And through those mediums is that I explore ideas of queerness, intimacy, relationships, and most recently violence, masculinity, as it relates to my Peruvian and queer identity.
I'm wondering if you could share a bit with us your personal take on this idea of gossip.
Yeah, gossip is a big part of, I don't want to say a big part of our culture, but it was certainly something that we talked a lot about growing up. Interestingly, in Peru, certainly in Latin America, in Spanish, the word for gossip is chisme, which is also the name of my dog, which is very, very fitting. One thing I find interesting is that in Spanish, gossip is not a verb, but it's a noun. So when you say chisme, you're referring to the hot little piece of information that you are holding that you want to kind of give to somebody. So, usually it's like, I have a piece of chisme that I need to give you. So I always think about that difference between, in English, gossip being very much a verb, like an active activity that you might do, whereas in Spanish, gossip being this precious thing, this piece of information that you must share with somebody. So I think that, chisme is kind of a bit of a way of life in Latin America. People are very nosy. And it's also just like a way of, culturally we come from a culture where everybody knows everything about everybody. Families are very interconnected, friendships are very interconnected. And I think while gossip tends to sometimes have a bit of a negative connotation, it's also a way in which we're all connected and knowing about each other at all times.
So the work we're talking about today is titled A Step Towards Something I Have Yet to Figure Out. So as I was pulling together this idea for gossip, for me I also kind of seen gossip as like a noun, something that you give. And I think it's such a critical mode of communication that has saved lives, but also has kind of right-sided power imbalances for folks who do lack power. And when I came across this particular work of yours, I immediately knew that I felt that it had to be a part of gossip because it just felt like it was directly communicating this idea around information, a loss of information, a gaining of information, this kind of rebirth of self. It was just so intimate in that way. And I'm just really curious, like what your take, what your ideas behind this work are, and how it feeds into this idea of communication and gossip.
Yeah, thank you for that. The image that you're mentioning, A Step Towards Something I Have Yet to Figure Out, is, it's a piece of paper that has writing on it. It's on fire. You can see smoke coming from it, and it's in an intimate, domestic space. And it's part of a body of work called Sentiment, which chronicled as I navigated the loss of our relationship, which was my first kind of big queer emotional relationship with someone I loved very deeply. And that's one of the very last images, if not likely the last image I made in that series after about 3 years of kind of processing that loss and making a lot of work about it. And the piece of paper that you see on fire is a letter that I wrote to this person, in which I said all the things that I hadn't really been able to say or that I wish I'd been able to say, and then burnt. And as you're talking about information, or how information travels, it was a moment where I felt I needed to put to paper a lot of things that had to be said, but did not have to be said to that person directly. They needed to be said for myself. And in some ways, hoping that that smoke or that intention would travel through kind of the psychic space, through the airways, and find that person to create this sort of psychic connection. And so I think it's really interesting to consider that piece in the context of this idea of gossip and how we communicate and how information travels from mouth to mouth, because it really was an attempt to deliver something very personal and something very intimate to someone without saying it per se to their face, because it didn't really need to be that way. Gossip can also take on a bit of a ritualistic dimension sometimes, so I think that there's this idea of burning something you said also obscures it, makes it secret, makes it covert, which has an element of gossip as well, and then hoping that that smoke kind of fizzles and finds its way to the right person. Also in some ways speaks to that ritualistic element of gossip. So I think there's a lot of interesting connections in there that can be made.
I love that, and I really love how you talk about this ritualistic aspect of gossip. It's a really powerful work. Immediately upon seeing it, I was moved. It's so powerful. I'm so excited for folks to see that work. I'm wondering if you could share a bit about your experience navigating the emotional landscape of photography in this work. You've shared a bit about it, but I'm wondering if there's anything else you might want to share and how that might tie into this idea around the theme of gossip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, as I mentioned, this particular body of work was a very emotional one to make. It's actually been, this work was made almost 15 years ago, and I haven't shown it in a really long time, and just in the last couple of years, a couple of the images have popped up into a few shows, this one included, and it's prompted me to revisit my artist statements, to revisit how I'm talking about the work, and which is always a helpful exercise. And looking back at how I wrote about the work when I was much younger, and in the midst of this emotional event, I'm realizing that it's really less about the shock and the grief of the loss of this relationship, but as I get older and I gain perspective, I'm realizing that it's about a very formational moment for a queer person. Often, maybe this is changing, but queer people, at least my age, we didn't get to have relationships in high school and middle school, to have boyfriends and girlfriends and break up, and so oftentimes we reach adulthood and these relationships become very defining in our identities. So I think photography became a way for me to make an image, make a record, create an archive of what it meant for someone like me to understand desire, to understand intimacy, to understand building a life, dreaming of a family, dreaming of a future with somebody, and knowing that it's possible. So I look back and really think of this work more as this kind of almost desperate effort to document, to archive a moment in my life when I felt that I could also have access to a meaningful life. And that in this case, with this particular person, it felt like it could be him, as opposed to, oh my God, I'm so sad that we broke up, So it's been really interesting, and I was thinking a little bit back to your comment about communication, and there's so many ways in which gossip can be broken down. I think a lot about Polari, for example, and a lot of people don't know Polari is a language that was developed by sailors, I believe it was early 20th century, maybe late 19th century, that was then co-opted by queer people to communicate outside the bounds of the police and law enforcement, so that queer people could communicate with each other about their intentions to hook up or to get together or to party without being understood by law enforcement, so that they wouldn't be jailed or prosecuted. So this idea that an entire community of people creates a new language to communicate covertly in the open, but in a way that nobody else can understand because it's theirs, I think is really powerful, and we see that still across communities of all different kinds. And so I think this covert language, this idea of speaking outside, kind of the margins, can be really powerful and life-saving, like you said. Yeah.
This is really an amazing conversation. Thank you, Rafael.
Thank you.
It's so great having you here today.
Yeah, thank you. I'm really excited to be in the show and share with all the amazing artists.
Thank you. We're excited for you all to see Gossip, which opens in August.